Since time immemorial, humanity has sought healing. But when the invisible becomes visible, what truly happens? Jesus' healing of the blind in the Gospels challenges both science and faith. Was it a divine miracle, the placebo effect acting surprisingly, mass hysteria, or the reversal of temporary conditions masquerading as incurable blindness? Get ready to delve into the mysteries of sight and belief, where science meets spirituality and the truth is more complex than we imagine. The biblical narratives of Jesus' healing of the blind are rich in detail, and their diversity invites a thorough analysis. While the core of the story, the restoration of sight, remains constant, the methods Jesus used and the reactions of those involved vary significantly in each account. The central theme of the healing of the blind is vividly illustrated through these concrete descriptions, providing us with the first clues to unravel the enigma. Attention to detail is not accidental. It reflects the evangelist's concern with recording not just the miracle, but the human, social, and theological context surrounding it, lending authenticity and depth to the narratives. Consider the episode in Matthew 9:27-31, where two blind men followed Jesus, persistently crying out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." They not only ask for help, but acknowledge him with a messianic title, demonstrating initial belief. Jesus' response is direct and incisive, testing the depth of their faith. "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" After the men's emphatic affirmation, he touches their eyes and powerfully declares, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." Instantly, their sight is restored, and they are instructed not to tell anyone, though they disobey. This account emphasizes faith, not as a mere passive desire, but as an active and profound conviction, a crucial component for the healing. This leads us to question, what was the exact role of this faith? Was it merely a catalyst for divine intervention, a sign of receptivity to grace? Or did faith itself, intense expectation and deep conviction, activate some internal healing process in the individual, acting as a powerful psychosomatic factor? This intrinsic connection between belief and outcome is a key point for the subsequent discussion about the placebo effect, suggesting that the individual's mental disposition could be a potent factor in the manifestation of healing, even if the greater power came from Jesus. In contrast, the healing of the blind man in Mark 8:22-26 in Bethsaida presents a more gradual and, for some, enigmatic process. Jesus takes the man outside the village in act of privacy, perhaps to avoid the commotion of the crowds or to focus on the individual personally spits on his eyes and lays his hands on him. When asked if he saw anything, the man responds in a curious and unexpected way, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." This partial and distorted vision is a crucial detail. Only after a second touch from Jesus on his eyes and another laying on of hands, the man's sight is completely restored, and he saw everything clearly. This two-stage healing is notable and raises several questions. Why wasn't it instantaneous, like in other accounts? Could it indicate that the nature of the blindness required a prolonged intervention, or a progressive activation of the visual system? Or perhaps it demonstrates a teaching moment for Jesus, instructing about patience, persistence in faith, or the progressive nature of spiritual healing. From a more skeptical or scientific perspective, this gradualness could suggest that the process was not a simple and immediate reversal of organic damage, but something more complex that required a second activation or perceptual adjustment, perhaps involving the brain's adaptation to new visual information. The case of the man born blind in John 9:1-7 is perhaps the most famous, detailed, and theologically charged, sparking intense social and religious debate. Upon seeing the blind man, the disciples asked Jesus if his blindness was a result of his own sin or his parents' sin, reflecting a common belief of the time. Jesus denies both explanations, stating that the purpose was for the works of God to be displayed in him. Then he spits on the ground, makes mud with the saliva, substance that was associated with popular medicinal properties at the time, and earth with creation, applies this paste to the blind man's eyes and instructs him to wash in the pool of Siloam, an act requiring obedience and faith in the process. The man obeys, washes, and returns seeing perfectly. The specificity of the method and the necessity of an act of obedience add intriguing layers to the narrative. This event is not just a healing. It becomes the catalyst for profound questioning about the origin of blindness, Jesus' identity, and the religious authority of the time. The miracle becomes the center of controversy and a public interrogation, with the healed man defending Jesus and the Pharisees doubting, which highlights the complexity of perceiving and accepting the extraordinary in the face of established dogmas and rigid thinking. These examples, with their particularities and methodological nuances, serve as the initial and concrete manifestations of the central theme of the healing of the blind. They not only solidify the foundation of belief in Jesus' healings, but also provide us with the essential starting points for the medical and psychological investigations we will pursue in the next sections, where we will attempt to unravel the mechanisms behind these events through a more scientific lens, seeking to understand the interaction between the physical, mental, and spiritual. Human history is intrinsically linked to the quest for healing, especially concerning a sense as vital as sight. In ancient times, when medical knowledge was rudimentary and many diseases were poorly understood, blindness was not merely a physical disability. It was often seen as a divine punishment, a curse, or a sign of impurity. This made the lives of the blind particularly challenging, as they were frequently marginalized and dependent on charity. In this context, any restoration of sight was interpreted as an extraordinary event, an intervention of the sacred in the profane world. Across various cultures, from healing practices in Egyptian and Greek temples, where gods like Asclepius or Serapis were invoked, and healing was sought through dreams and incubation rituals, to shamanic traditions across the globe, the belief in the power of higher entities to cure ailments was constant. Narratives of pilgrimages to healing sanctuaries, such as those at Epidaurus in Greece or shrines dedicated to Isis in Egypt, where complex rituals were employed to invoke divine healing, echo the persistent human hope for transcendent intervention to alleviate suffering, especially for conditions as debilitating as blindness. It is against this backdrop of deep longing and spiritual significance that the figure of Jesus of Nazareth emerges, with the gospel narratives highlighting his healings as central elements of his mission and message. The New Testament accounts, particularly in the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John, describe multiple episodes where Jesus restores sight to the blind. These accounts are not mere notes, but vivid descriptions detailing the encounter, the method of healing, and the reactions of those involved, often with striking realism. Cases such as the healing of the two blind men in Matthew 9:27-31, where faith is an explicit prerequisite. The blind man of Bethsaida in Mark 8:22-26, with a gradual healing. Blind Bartimaeus in Mark 10:46-52, who persistently cries out to Jesus, defying the crowd that tried to silence him. And the man born blind in John 9:1-7, whose healing sparks a profound theological and social debate about sin, suffering, and Jesus' identity, are emblematic examples of the impact and importance of these narratives. Each of these stories serves as a fundamental pillar for understanding Jesus' ministry and his transformative message. For the early Christians and the theological tradition that followed, these healings were more than mere isolated wonders. They were clear signs of Jesus' divinity and the fulfillment of long-awaited messianic prophecies. Prophets like Isaiah had predicted the coming of a Messiah who would perform extraordinary deeds, including the restoration of sight. Isaiah 35:5 declares, Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. And Isaiah 42:7 speaks of opening the eyes of the blind. Thus, every touch, every word from Jesus that resulted in regained sight not only alleviated individual suffering, but reinforced the belief that he was the promised one who brought light not only to the eyes, but also to the souls and spiritual understanding of humanity. The very word Messiah implies a liberator who would usher in a new era of justice and restoration, and the ability to reverse a condition as limiting as blindness was irrefutable proof of this restorative and transformative power that he embodied. The significance of these healings transcends the physical act. They were powerful social and theological statements. By healing the blind, Jesus not only restored their ability to see the physical world and move about autonomously, but also their dignity and social status, reintegrating them into the community and challenging the prejudiced notions that disability was a sign of personal sin or divine disfavor. In a society where disability was often synonymous with exclusion, Jesus' healings were radical acts of inclusion and compassion. The crowds witnessing these events were profoundly impacted, and these stories became pillars of Christian faith, grounding the belief in a power that transcends human comprehension and manifests itself in a compassionate and transformative way. The central theme of the healing of the blind is established here, rooted in a deep context of faith, messianic expectation, and a powerful perception of the divine, paving the way for the questions we will explore next about its true nature and the scientific lenses that can help us better understand these events without disregarding their spiritual significance. To deepen our understanding of the central theme of the healing of the blind, it is imperative to explore the possible laws, patterns, or underlying mechanisms that modern science could offer as explanations. Understanding the placebo effect, the dynamics of mass hysteria, and the existence of temporary reversible conditions can shed a new and fascinating light on the biblical narratives, without necessarily invalidating the spiritual aspect, but by adding layers of complexity and enriching our view of these phenomena. This multidisciplinary approach allows us to expand the dialogue beyond a simple dichotomy between faith and skepticism. First, the placebo effect is a scientifically robust and increasingly understood phenomenon, where improvement in a patient's condition is attributed to the expectation of healing, rather than to a specific active substance or treatment. In the context of vision, studies have shown that an individual's beliefs and expectations can directly influence visual function, especially in conditions where blindness is not organic, meaning there is no irreversible physical damage to the eye components. The brain, activated by faith, suggestion, and the symbolic context of the healing, can trigger a series of neurochemical responses such as the release of endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin, the social bonding hormone, which can increase feelings of safety and well-being, reducing stress that might underlie psychosomatic symptoms, which, in cases of non-organic blindness, could theoretically restore visual perception. If the blindness was of psychogenic origin, functional blindness with no physical damage to the eyes or optic nerves, but a problem of neural processing or a psychic defense mechanism, unwavering faith in an authority figure like Jesus, perceived as possessing divine power and incomparable charisma, could function as an extremely potent placebo. The conviction of being healed, the environment of intense collective hope, and the ritual of healing could unblock neural pathways, allowing sight to return. Narratives where the blind person's faith is an explicit prerequisite fit perfectly into this perspective, suggesting that healing was mediated, in part, by a powerful mind-body process. Second, mass hysteria or mass conversion disorder is a psychosocial phenomenon in which a group of people manifests real physical symptoms, but without a detectable organic cause driven by stress, anxiety, or social suggestion. While more commonly associated with symptoms like fainting, nausea, seizures, numbness, or paralysis. The perception of improved vision, especially in an environment of strong suggestion and emotion, cannot be entirely ruled out. In a context where the expectation of miracles was high, Jesus' figure was charismatic and inspiring, and belief in his healing ability was contagious. The mere idea that sight could be restored could lead some individuals with functional blindness to see where they previously did not, or to experience an amplification of minimal visual perception that already existed under the effect of mass suggestion. However, it is crucial to note that mass hysteria rarely results in lasting and objectively verifiable cures for pre-existing proven organic diseases. Its application to the healing of the blind would be more plausible if the blindness was functional self-suggested, or referred to an amplified perception of a minor transient or psychosomatic improvement that is quickly transmitted and reinforced by social contagion. Lastly, but no less importantly, the existence of temporary reversible conditions offers a medical explanation for some of the healings, without the need to resort to psychosomatic or supernatural phenomena. Not all blindness is permanent or caused by irreversible damage to the ocular structure or central nervous system. There are various conditions that can lead to temporary vision loss, which may resolve spontaneously or with simple intervention. Examples include hysterical blindness, a specific form of functional blindness usually triggered by emotional trauma where there is no apparent physical damage, but visual function is impaired and can be reversible. Amaurosis fugax, transient and temporary loss of vision in one or both eyes, usually due to a problem with blood flow to the retina or optic nerve, which lasts from seconds to minutes and resolves spontaneously. Severe blepharospasm, involuntary and persistent contraction of the eyelids, which can prevent eye opening and, although not causing actual blindness, simulates the inability to see. Or even certain severe nutritional deficiencies that cause night blindness, nyctalopia, due to vitamin A deficiency, which can be reversible with supplementation and in low-light conditions can be perceived as total blindness. Furthermore, some forms of acute ocular inflammations or attacks of acute angle closure glaucoma can cause temporary vision loss that, if untreated, can become permanent, but which may have moments of spontaneous remission or be alleviated by external factors. In such cases, the spontaneous remission of the condition or the natural occurrence of improvement could have coincided with Jesus' intervention, being perceived as a miracle by those present. This would not diminish the impact of the event for those who witnessed it, but would offer a medical basis for what was seen as supernatural, turning the healing into a coincidental remission of a reversible condition. By detailing these underlying mechanisms, we demonstrate how science seeks to operate in understanding complex phenomena, offering multiple lenses of analysis. The central theme of the healing of the blind is, therefore, a fertile ground for investigation that encompasses both faith and rigorous scientific analysis, showing how different perspectives can help us understand events that, at first glance, seem beyond reason and challenging us to a more integrated view of health and the human experience. To deepen our analysis of the central theme of the healing of the blind, let's focus on a specific medical and psychological aspect that offers an intriguing perspective and may have played a crucial role in some of the biblical healings. Functional blindness, also known as psychogenic blindness or conversion disorder with loss of vision. This condition is a vivid example of how the mind can profoundly influence the body and its senses, and how the power of suggestion can be a surprisingly therapeutic force, acting as a shortcut to restoring functions that seemed lost. Functional blindness is a genuine neurological condition, but without an organic cause. This means that an individual experiences total or partial loss of vision, but without any detectable physical or neurological damage to the eyes, optic nerves, or the visual areas of the brain. It is as if the visual hardware, the eyes and their physical connections, is intact and fully functional, capable of capturing images. But the cerebral software, the ability to process, interpret, and consciously perceive these images, is impaired, blocked, or suppressed. Generally, this condition is an unconscious manifestation of intense and unresolved psychological distress, such as overwhelming chronic stress, severe emotional trauma, for example. Witnessing a shocking event, paralyzing anxiety, deep internal conflicts, or even a subconscious defense mechanism to escape an unbearable situation. For the patient, blindness is a tangible, debilitating, and distressing reality. They are not faking or feigning. The vision loss is real to them at the level of perception. The most notable and relevant characteristic of functional blindness is that the recovery of vision often does not depend on conventional medical treatments targeting the eye or nervous system. Instead, healing is more frequently achieved through interventions that address the underlying psychological root of the problem. This is where the power of therapeutic suggestion becomes an extraordinarily potent tool. In a modern therapeutic setting, a mental health professional such as a psychologist, psychiatrist, or a specialized therapist can employ various techniques. These include clinical hypnosis, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, or even the administration of a placebo, carefully contextualized and imbued with meaning. The goal is to create an expectation of healing so strong and a cognitive or emotional restructuring that the patient's brain unblocks neural pathways and relearns to process the visual information that the eyes are already capturing. Belief in healing, a supportive and welcoming environment, and a trusting relationship with the therapist act as a powerful trigger for neuroplasticity, allowing the brain to reorganize its neural connections and restore visual function, sometimes dramatically and almost instantaneously, which to a layperson can seem like a miracle. Applying this knowledge to Jesus' healings, it is perfectly plausible to consider that some of the individuals he healed might have suffered from functional blindness. The scenario of a charismatic and profoundly revered figure like Jesus, who exuded authority, compassion, and unquestionable power, to those who saw him as a prophet, healer, or even divine operating in a context of fervent faith and miraculous expectation, created an ideal and highly potent environment for suggestion. Jesus' touch, his imperative command, or even the use of symbolic elements like saliva and mud, which in addition to a spiritual meaning could act as a ritual that intensified belief and expectation and provided a palpable focal point for suggestion, could have functioned as a powerful stimulus for the reversal of functional blindness. For the healed individual, the miracle was real and immediate, as sight was restored, and the experience profoundly transformative and liberating. For observers, the event was equally miraculous, challenging common logic and reinforcing Jesus' divine nature and power. Science, here, offers a bridge to understand the how without necessarily contradicting the who or the why from a theological perspective. This analysis does not seek to discredit the spiritual or miraculous aspect of Jesus' healings, but rather to offer a complementary and enriching perspective, focusing on how the complexity of the human mind and its self-regulatory mechanisms, even without explicit supernatural intervention, can be capable of extraordinary feats under specific conditions of belief and suggestion. The unique facet of functional blindness allows us to dissect the central theme of the healing of the blind through a neuropsychological lens, exploring the profound nuances of what may have occurred, transcending the simplistic dichotomy between miracle and deception, and revealing the remarkable and mysterious interconnection between mind and body, faith and perception, in the intricate tapestry of health and illness. It is a reminder that the power of healing can reside in unexpected places, including the very human capacity to believe. The central theme of the healing of the blind is not merely a relic of the past. It manifests and resonates powerfully in contemporary scenarios, highlighting the constant tension and, at times, the fascinating convergence between faith and science in the incessant quest for healing and for understanding what it means to see. Although modern medicine has made extraordinary advancements in treating and preventing various forms of blindness, the question of miraculous or spontaneous healing continues to challenge and inspire both scientists and religious people, opening an ongoing dialogue about the limits of human knowledge and the nature of reality itself. In the 21st century, medicine offers a range of revolutionary solutions for vision loss that were once unimaginable and seemed like pure science fiction. From routine cataract surgeries, which restore sight to millions of people annually with a high success rate, to cutting-edge technologies like corneal transplants that restore visual clarity in cases of severe corneal damage, and even retinal prostheses which, though still under development, already allow the perception of light and form in cases of profound blindness caused by retinal degeneration. More recently, gene therapy has emerged as a promising frontier with approvals for the treatment of rare, hereditary diseases that once caused incurable blindness, such as Leber congenital amaurosis, offering real hope for the restoration of visual function at a genetic level. However, even with all this technological arsenal and vast scientific knowledge, there are still forms of blindness and other medical conditions that remain incurable or for which existing treatments are limited. And it is in these spaces of uncertainty and despair that faith and the search for unconventional interventions continue to thrive intensely. Spiritual healing centers, faith retreats, and religious communities that promote divine healing through fervent prayer, laying on of hands, or pilgrimages to sacred sites, like Lourdes in France or Aparecida in Brazil, continue to attract millions of desperate people, including those suffering from blindness. In these contexts, narratives of spontaneous healings, attributed to supernatural intervention, echo the biblical stories and keep the hope of a miracle alive, generating fervent testimonies and supportive communities that reinforce belief in the power of the divine. Science, in turn, does not ignore these phenomena, but approaches them with a lens of rigorous investigation and an open mind. The placebo effect is an active and legitimate field of research within neuroscience, psychology, and psychosomatic medicine, which seeks to understand how expectations, beliefs, the social environment, and the doctor-patient relationship can activate intrinsic healing mechanisms within the body itself. Neuroimaging studies, such as functional magnetic resonance imaging, have shown, for example, that the administration of a placebo can activate brain regions associated with pain modulation, pleasure, and reward, releasing substances like endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin, which can have real physiological effects, including symptom reduction, inflammation modulation, and alteration of sensory perception. Regarding vision specifically, more recent research suggests that the placebo can influence visual acuity, color perception, and even visual cortical plasticity, indicating that the mind can indeed tune and optimize visual perception in certain contexts. This does not imply that all faith healings are just placebos in the pejorative sense of deceptions or illusions. On the contrary, it suggests that the power of belief and the mind is a real and measurable component of healing that science is only beginning to unravel in all its complexity, validating the subjective and at times objective effectiveness of non-pharmacological or surgical interventions. Additionally, the concept of neuroplasticity, the remarkable ability of the brain to reorganize itself, form new neural connections, and even compensate for lost functions throughout life, offers another crucial lens for understanding spontaneous remissions and seemingly inexplicable healings. In cases of functional blindness where the problem is more a communication failure or blockage in the neural processing of visual information than irreversible physical damage to the eye or optic nerve, an emotionally charged experience, a powerful suggestion, or a moment of profound catharsis and emotional release could theoretically induce the brain to reconnect, visual pathways restoring function. This does not mean that an eye blinded by irreversible damage would regain sight from scratch, but rather that a brain that was blind for psychological or functional reasons could relearn to see, integrating visual information that was previously ignored or suppressed, analogous to a computer system that has a software bug and a reinstallation or reboot solves the problem. The intersection between faith and science in the healing of the blind in modern times is fertile ground for dialogue, intellectual humility, and deep reflection. Faith can offer immense psychological and spiritual support, providing unwavering hope, resilience to face adversity, a sense of community, and purpose in the face of illness and suffering. Science, on the other hand, offers rigorous methods to investigate, replicate, and develop evidence-based treatments that can benefit a larger number of people, regardless of their beliefs, in a predictable and safe manner, seeking to alleviate suffering for all. The question, miracle or placebo, is not an exclusive dichotomy intended to invalidate one side in favor of the other, but an invitation to explore the complex and mysterious interaction between the spiritual dimension of human existence and the intricate mechanisms of the body and mind. This shows how the central theme of the healing of the blind continues to evolve in contemporary scenarios, shaping our understanding of health, well-being, and the limits of what we consider possible, and challenging us to a more holistic view of existence. Throughout this journey, we have delved deeply into the central theme of the healing of the blind, analyzing it through lenses ranging from the biblical narrative of unwavering faith and divine intervention to the scientific concepts of the placebo effect, mass hysteria, and functional blindness. However, as we approach the end, it is crucial to recognize that, despite all the advancements in analysis, there are aspects that continue to challenge the limits of our human understanding. What do these events truly reveal about our perception of reality, and what still transcends our capacity for explanation and measurement? The truth, like vision, often resides in layers that need to be patiently unveiled. Science, with its rigorous methodology, empiricism, investigative logic, and tireless pursuit of rational and reproducible explanations, has provided us with unprecedented insight into the workings of the universe, the human body, and the mind. It allows us to unravel the complex biological, psychological, and social mechanisms that can offer profound insights and even explanations for phenomena that, in other eras, would have been categorized purely as supernatural or unexplainable. The understanding of the placebo effect as a manifestation of the body's intrinsic ability to heal, a complex interaction between cerebral expectations, conditioning, and measurable physiological responses. The comprehension of psychogenic blindness as a real neurological condition, though without apparent organic cause, demonstrating the power of the mind over the body in surprising ways, and the recognition of temporary reversible conditions that can mimic incurable blindness, offering an explanation for coinciding miraculous remissions, are eloquent examples of how reason and scientific investigation can illuminate what was once obscure. From this perspective, it is perfectly conceivable that some of the healings of the blind narrated in antiquity, including those attributed to Jesus, could have an explanation, albeit partial and limited by the knowledge of the time within these scientific parameters. Science does not seek to devalue the experience, but rather to explain it. However, there is a dimension that science, by its very nature, methodology, and scope, finds it difficult to quantify, measure, replicate, or even fully conceive, that of faith and miracle. For millions of people around the world, from centuries past to the present day, Jesus' healings are not merely historical events subject to medical or psychological analysis. They are, fundamentally, living testimonies of divine power, boundless compassion, and the direct intervention of a greater supernatural force that operates beyond known natural laws. Belief in supernatural intervention is not, for those who genuinely profess it, an irrationality or an escape from reality, but a legitimate and profound way of understanding a universe that, for many, extends far beyond what is materially observable and scientifically provable. Narratives of miracles, transmitted through generations, are not mere folktales. They are living sources of hope, unwavering resilience, solace amid suffering, and a deep sense of purpose and connection with the transcendent, with something infinitely greater than oneself. They fill an existential void that science, in its pursuit of causes and effects, cannot completely fill, offering meaning and purpose. Our limits of understanding are vast and, fortunately, ever expanding. Science is a continuous project, an inexhaustible journey towards knowledge. And what is unexplainable today may be unveiled tomorrow by new discoveries, new technologies, and new theories that expand our paradigms. Likewise, faith in its essence is not content only with the known and the probable. It embraces mystery, the ineffable, that which by definition transcends pure rational logic and the limits of human language. The healing of the blind, whether interpreted as a divine miracle, a powerful placebo effect activated by faith, the spontaneous remission of a psychogenic condition, or the recognition of a reversible illness, reminds us that reality is intrinsically multifaceted, woven by threads that science and faith approach from different angles. Different lenses offer us different truths, and the greatest richness lies in the ability to contemplate them all without prejudice, with an open and curious mind, recognizing that the totality of existence may be greater than the sum of its parts. Perhaps true wisdom does not lie in having a single definitive answer to the apparent dichotomy between miracle and placebo, but in the very depth of the question and the willingness to explore all its facets. This duality invites us to reflect on the profound and often mysterious interconnection between the spiritual and biological dimensions, between faith and reason, between mind and body. What these events, regardless of their exact nature, reveal to us is that the ability to see, whether literally or metaphorically, with the eyes of the body or the soul, can be restored through paths that we are still trying to map. And that hope, belief, compassion, and the complexity of the human condition are powerful forces to continue to operate, challenging our definitions, expanding our horizons, and deepening our wonder at the unexplainable. The central theme of the healing of the blind thus remains an eternal invitation to wonder questioning, and the relentless pursuit of what lies beyond the visible, the tangible, and the purely rational, reminding us of the vastness of life's mysteries. Miracle or placebo? The healing of the blind, from Jesus to modern science, transports us to a fascinating frontier between faith and reason. What truly happened in those days, and what can we learn about the extraordinary capacity of the human mind and body, and the power of belief? The answer may not be simple, but the very search for it reveals the complexity, beauty, and mystery surrounding healing, inviting us to reflect on what it truly means to see and the infinite possibilities that reside at the intersection of the visible and the invisible.